My name is Evelyn Shaw, and I am a historian of medicine. My specialty is the architecture of control, how brick, mortar, and iron were used to cage not just bodies, but minds. For the last 5 years, my life has been a blur of dusty archives, microfiche readers, and the gentle, decaying smell of century-old ledgers. My magnum opus was to be a definitive work on the Blackburn Sanatorium, a network of asylums built in the post-Civil War era, infamous for their moral architecture and their abrupt, mysterious closures around the 1920s. The official records were sanitized, speaking of funding shortages and a shift towards community-based care. But my research, pieced together from patient diaries, whistleblowing letters from discharged orderlies, and heavily redacted state inspection reports, told a different story. A story of silence, of treatments that left no physical mark, and of whispers about a place called the Quiet Wing. My breakthrough came from a crate of condemned materials found during a renovation of the state capitol building. Among them was the personal journal of Dr. Alastair Finch, the last chief administrator of the central, and largest, Blackburn facility, Ravenswood Asylum. The journal wasn't a clinical log. It was a confession, filled with a feverish, paranoid script. He wrote of harvesting silence, of dentities that feast on sound, and of a great quieting that was scheduled for the winter of 1921. The final entry, dated October 29, 1921, was a single, trembling sentence: "God forgive us, we opened a door and cannot close it. The silence is hungry. It is coming." The State Archives had a final, curious document, a land survey from 1952 that listed the Ravenswood property. Scrawled in the margin was a note: structure unsound. Foundation compromised. Recommend non-demolition, permanent quarantine. See Annex VIIB. Annex VIIB was missing. This was no longer academic. It was an obsession. I had to see it. I packed my gear, a high-resolution camera, audio recorders, powerful lights, and a rationalist skepticism, and drove deep into the forgotten woods of the state. Finding Ravenswood was the first trial. Roads had been deliberately erased from maps, overgrown until they were little more than deer trails. When I finally saw it, looming through the skeletal winter trees, my blood ran cold. It was a monstrous edifice of Gothic revival and Kirkbride plan, a decaying monument to arrogance and fear. Its windows were like sightless eyes, some bricked up, others gaping blackly. The air around it was preternaturally still. No bird sang. No insect chirped. The massive front doors were chained and padlocked, rusted shut for a century. But a side entrance, a delivery bay, had rotted away from its hinges. I slipped inside. The air was thick and cold, a stale chill that seeped into my bones. My flashlight beam cut through a darkness so profound it felt solid. Dust motes danced like agitated spirits. The place was a snapshot of sudden abandonment. A wheelchair sat in a corridor, its leather upholstery cracked and peeled. Medical charts, faded to ghosts of text, still hung on walls. I entered a day room, and my light glinted off something on the floor, a scattering of small, white objects. Teeth. Human teeth. My rational mind concocted an explanation: scavengers, weather, the natural decay of organic matter. But the explanation felt flimsy, a childish incantation against a growing dread. I set up my audio recorder out of habit, more for atmosphere than anything else. I spoke, my voice a sacrilegious intrusion in the hush. Evelyn Shaw, Log 1. November 3rd. I have entered the central administrative building of Ravenswood Asylum. The state of preservation is unsettling. Signs of rapid departure are everywhere. Personal effects are still. A sound. A soft, shuffling scrape. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I swung the light around. Nothing. Just long shadows twisting away from the beam. Probably a rat, I whispered to myself, the lie tasting bitter. I moved deeper, following a floor plan I'd memorized from the archives. I was looking for the West Wing, where Finch's journal suggested his office was located. The corridors seemed to stretch longer than the blueprints indicated, turning in impossible angles. The silence began to change. It was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a presence. A heavy, listening stillness that pressed against my eardrums. I found a staircase leading down. According to the plans, this was supposed to be a storage basement. But the steps were worn smooth, as if by countless footsteps, descending far deeper than any basement should. This was the way to the quiet wing. I knew it with a certainty that terrified me. I descended. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath plumed in the beam of my flashlight. The walls down here were different, not brick or plaster, but a strange, dull grey metal that seemed to absorb the light and sound. My footsteps, which had echoed faintly upstairs, were now deadened, swallowed whole. The corridor at the bottom was long and low, lined with doors. These were not ordinary cell doors. They were massive, made of the same sound-absorbing metal, with complex locking mechanisms and only a tiny, reinforced glass viewport at eye level. I raised my light to the first one. The room inside was small, padded from floor to ceiling with a stained, fibrous material. In the center of the room sat a figure. I jumped back, a scream catching in my throat. But the figure didn't move. I leaned closer, peering through the grimy glass. It was a man, or what was left of one. He was desiccated, mummified by the cold, dry air. He was seated in a chair, his head tilted back, and his mouth was open in a silent, eternal scream. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart. They were gone. Not rotted away. They looked seared shut, the eyelids fused into wrinkled, scarred tissue. A memory from Finch's journal flashed in my mind. The procedure quiets the neural noise. The eyes are the first to go. The windows of the soul must be shuttered to contain the silence within. I stumbled to the next door. Another occupant, similarly preserved, similarly blinded. And the next. And the next. This was Finch's work. This was the great quieting. He wasn't metaphorically silencing them, he was surgically, horrifically creating literal silence by removing their ability to perceive or create sound, turning them into empty vessels. But for what? I reached the end of the corridor. There was one final door, larger than the others, without a viewport. Instead, in the center of the metal, was a large, wheel-like valve. It was cold to the touch. My recorder was still running. I held it up, my hand trembling. The patients, they're all here. Dozens of them. Finch didn't transfer them. He turned them into this. He was harvesting something from them. Their silence. But to what end? This door, it feels wrong. I reached out and touched the cold metal valve. The moment my skin made contact, a deep, subsonic hum vibrated through the floor, up my legs, and into my teeth. The valve began to turn on its own, with a shriek of protesting metal that sounded like a thing in agony. The door swung inward, revealing not a room, but a vast, natural cavern that stretched away into an impossible blackness. The air that washed out was ancient and frigid, carrying a smell of ozone and stone and something else, a sweet, metallic odor I instinctively recognized as the scent of a terrified human body. And from that darkness, something emerged. It had no true form. It was a shifting, coalescing patch of absolute blackness, a hole in reality shaped like a man but utterly wrong. It didn't walk, it unfolded across the space between us. Where it passed, the faint hum of my equipment, the sound of my own frantic breathing, the thud of my heart in my ears, it all vanished. It was a walking null field, an entropy of sound. This was the silence. This was what Finch had been feeding. This was what he'd let in. It glided towards the first cell. It passed through the solid metal door as if it weren't there. I watched, paralyzed, as it hovered over the mummified figure. A tendril of nothingness extended from its form and touched the man's chest. There was no physical reaction, but I felt a wave of profound, soul-shattering absence wash through the corridor. The thing seemed to solidify, for just a second, its form becoming slightly more defined. It was feeding. Consuming the last vestiges of the silence it had been gifted a century ago. It finished and flowed back through the door, moving to the next cell. And the next. It was making its rounds. This was its larder. My paralysis broke. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I scrambled up the impossibly long staircase, my lungs burning in the dead air. I burst into the main hallway and sprinted for the delivery entrance. I didn't stop until I was in my car, the engine screaming as I fishtailed down the overgrown path. I didn't stop until I was back in my apartment, surrounded by the normal, comforting sounds of the city. I was safe. I had escaped. That was 2 weeks ago. At first, I thought I was just traumatized. The sounds of my apartment began to fade. The drip of the faucet became intermittent, then stopped altogether. The hum of my refrigerator quieted. I found myself turning up the volume on the TV, then the radio, then my headphones, desperate to fill the growing quiet. Then the whispers started. Not voices, exactly. They were the impression of voices, the ghost of a sound, heard not with my ears but felt in the hollow of my skull. They were just on the edge of comprehension, a sibilant, rustling murmur that spoke of ancient, hungry things. I started seeing things in the corners of my vision, a flicker of movement, a patch of deeper shadow that lingered for a moment too long. The air in my home grew cold in spots. My audio recorder, which I had left running that night, is now blank. Not erased. The file is there, its duration showing 6 hours. But it contains nothing. No sound of my footsteps, no sound of my voice. Just perfect, digital silence. Last night, I woke up to find a figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was the man from the first cell, his eyeless face turned towards me. His mouth was open in that silent scream. I tried to scream myself, but my voice was gone. The air in my throat was dead. I could only watch as he raised a desiccated hand and pointed at me. Then he was gone. I know what is happening. I didn't escape. I was tagged, marked. My curiosity, my intrusion, my sound, it attracted attention. I brought a piece of it back with me. It's not following me. It's unmaking the world around me, starting with the sound, preparing my environment for its arrival. I am becoming a new vessel. A new source of silence. The whispers are clearer now. They've been practicing. I can understand them. Soon, they whisper, their voices like dry leaves skittering across a stone floor. You will be so quiet. You will be so still. You will house a great and terrible silence. I'm writing this down now because it's the last sound I can make. The keyboard's clicks are faint, like they're coming from another room. My own breathing is a distant rumor. The world is fading into a grey, soundless static. The disturbing truth I found in 150 years of forgotten asylums is not just a historical horror. It's a biological one. Silence is not an absence. It is a living, hungry entity. And we, with our noisy, chaotic lives, are nothing but cattle to it. Men like Finch didn't just discover it, they worshipped it, nurtured it, and made a pact with it. They traded the souls of their patients for a promise that it would remain in its cavern, sated. But it is never sated. It's here now. Standing in the doorway of my study. It has no face, but I know it's looking at me. The last of the sound is draining from the room, sucked into its void-like form. This is my final entry. My final sound. I am so sorry. I am. The cursor blinks. A tiny, digital pulse in the growing void. It is the last moving thing in the room, the last shred of time passing. The thing in the doorway does not move. It moves. It is a crystallization of absolute stillness, and its presence is a vacuum that pulls at the world, at the light, at the very meaning of the objects in the room. My fingers are numb on the keyboard. The sensation is not leaving my body is leaving the sensation. The hum of my laptop, a sound so constant I had long since tuned it out, is gone. The screen is silent. The faint traffic noise from the street 5 stories below has been extinguished. My own heartbeat, the frantic drum solo of terror in my chest, is slowing, its rhythm becoming soft, then faint, then nothing. I am a statue made of meat, trapped in a diorama of my own demise. The entity glides forward. It does not displace air. It consumes the very possibility of motion. The books on my shelves, the papers strewn across my desk, the dust motes frozen in the beam of my lamp, they all seem to lean towards it, yearning for the nullity it offers. Its form is less a shape and more a theorem of absence, proven in 3 dimensions. As it draws nearer, the details of my world don't just fade, they are UN-written. The rich grain of the oak desk becomes smooth, featureless pasteboard. The vibrant red of a book spine bleeds away into a dull, uniform grey. Color is a kind of noise, and it is being silenced. It stops before me. I cannot look away. I have no eyes to close. My eyelids are sewn shut by its proximity. I feel a pressure, not on my skin, but on myself. It is the pressure of an infinite, soundless ocean descending into the Mariana Trench of my soul. A tendril of nothingness extends from its core. It is not a limb. It is a concept, the concept of not touching, made manifest. It reaches for my forehead. The contact is ice and fire and void. It is not pain. It is the memory of pain, the echo of a scream from a lifetime ago. It is the dissolution of memory itself. I see. I feel flashes. Dr. Finch, young and ambitious, in the cavern beneath Ravenswood, not with fear, but with a fanatic's glee. He holds a tuning fork that vibrates at a frequency that makes the stone walls weep black tears. He is not opening a door. He is answering a call. A patient, a woman who heard symphonies in the drip of water, whose mind was a beautiful, chaotic opera. They strap her to the chair. The procedure is not surgical. It is alchemical. They use silver rods, charged with that same frequency, placed against her temples. Her vibrant internal noise is drawn out of her like venom from a wound, a shimmering, invisible energy that is siphoned into a glass vessel. She is left a hollow shell, blind and silent. The thing in the cavern feeds. It grows stronger. The pact, Finch and his inner circle provide the silence, and in return, the entity grants them glimpses into the clockwork of the universe. They see the strings of causality. They gain a whisper of prophecy. They become addicted to the quiet knowledge. But the entity's appetite is insatiable. It demands more. Always more. The Great Quieting of 1921. They empty the entire West Wing. Dozens of patients at a time. The entity feasts, and its power swells, spilling out of the cavern. It begins to affect the staff. Orderlies forget how to speak. Nurses walk into walls, their sense of echolocation erased. The world within Ravenswood becomes a silent film, then a series of still images, then nothing. Finch, finally understanding the horror of his god, tries to close the door. But a door, once opened, cannot be closed from one side. The entity's final gift to him is the prophecy of its own escape. He sees it spreading across the world, a grey, soundless tide, reducing the roaring chaos of humanity to a stillborn, museum-like perfection. He writes his last journal entry as the silence climbs the stairs to his office. The visions cease. The tendril is buried in my mind. It is not reading my thoughts. It is deleting them. Each memory, each emotion, each whispered secret of my life is being siphoned away, converted into pure, nourishing silence for the thing before me. I am being unmade. Not killed. UN created. My past is going first. The smell of rain on hot asphalt as a child. Gone. The sound of my father's laughter. Gone. The feeling of my first kiss. Gone. They are not fading. They are being precisely, meticulously excised, each memory a file being dragged into a cosmic trash bin and emptied. I feel a profound, gravitational pull towards the entity. It is not pulling my body. It is pulling my consciousness into its void. To become a part of it. To spend eternity as a single note in its infinite, silent symphony. This is the fate of the patients. They are not dead. Their consciousnesses are trapped within it, alone in the crowd, forever aware of the nothingness they inhabit. The man who pointed at me was not a ghost. He was a warning. A fellow prisoner screaming from behind the bars of a soundless cell. The thing is almost done with me. The world is now a study in grey. My body is a distant, cold thing. I am a single, fading thought in a mind that is almost empty. But a thought remains. One last, stubborn spark. The thought is not a memory. It is an action. The final, reflexive twitch of a condemned brain. My finger, resting on the keyboard, spasms. It presses down. The key is the letter clicks. The sound is microscopic. A plastic-on-plastic talk. In the absolute, world-ending silence of the entity's presence, it is a supernova. The thing recoils. It is a minute motion, a flicker in its absolute stillness, but it is the most profound event I have ever witnessed. The sound, tiny, fragile, stupidly human, is an anathema to it. A poison. The pressure on my mind lessens for a nanosecond. And in that nanosecond, a memory floods back. Not a happy one. A raw, terrible one. The sound of my mother weeping at my father's funeral. A sound of pure, ugly, human grief. It is noise. It is chaos. It is life. A gasp rasps in my throat. It is a painful, alien sound. The entity stabilizes, turning its attention back to me, its hunger now tinged with something new, annoyance. My momentary resistance was an irrelevance, a gnat buzzing at a titan. But it was enough. The tendril pushes deeper, ready to finish the job. I look past the entity, towards my doorway. The eyeless man is there again. And behind him, others. The woman who heard symphonies. A young man with a poet's hands. Dozens of them. The larder has arrived. They are not pointing. They are not threatening. They are watching. And I understand. They are not here to harm me. They are drawn to the process. They are witnesses to my assimilation. But in their hollowed-out consciousnesses, a tiny ember still smolders. The ember of witness. The ember of memory. The entity's work is not just consumption. It is eradication. It wants to leave no witness, no record, no story. The patients are a flaw in its perfect silence. They remember the noise they once were. They remember the world before. And I am a historian. My purpose is to remember. To record. The two impulses, its need to erase, and my need to preserve, crash together inside what's left of my mind. The thing hesitates. My purpose makes me a tougher morsel to digest. I am filled with the chaotic noise of history, of stories, of time. I am not a single, pure note of silence like the patients were. I am a cacophony. It is this cacophony that is my anchor. With an effort that cracks the remains of my soul, I force my hand to move. It is like moving a mountain. I drag my fingers across the keyboard. I am not typing words. I am mashing keys. I am creating noise. Clack clack tap space clack enter. A meaningless, chaotic, glorious racket. The entity shudders. The greyness in the room wavers. The eyeless patients lean forward, their empty gazes fixed on my hands. I am a flickering candle in a vast, dark wind. But I am still lit. The thing realizes I am not going quietly into that good night. It changes its strategy. The tendril retracts from my mind. The pressure vanishes, replaced by a new, more terrifying sensation, indifference. It does not need to consume me here. It can wait. It turns away from me and glides toward the doorway, passing through the gathered patients as if they are missed. They turn and follow it, their procession a silent funeral march. The sound returns to the world in a dizzying, nauseating wave. The hum of the laptop, the distant wail of a siren, the frantic, thunderous pounding of my heart. Color rushes back into the room, so violently it hurts my eyes. I am alone. I am weeping, great, heaving sobs that are the most beautiful sounds I have ever heard. I did not win. I merely postponed the inevitable. I am a temporary anomaly, a spelling error in its silent text. It has marked my location. It will return when I am weaker, when my noise has died down, when I am asleep. It knows I cannot make sound forever. I look at my computer screen. The last line I typed is a string of gibberish, asvjkl, asvjkl, dot. But above it, my story remains. The truth. The record. It is not enough to have written it. A record must be preserved. It must be heard. My time is not spent hiding or waiting. It is spent publishing. I upload this document to cloud servers, said to be emailed to news outlets, universities, every conspiracy theory forum I can find. I print copies and mail them to friends, to enemies, to strangers. I shout the story from the digital rooftops. I am making as much noise as I possibly can. Because I understand the final, most disturbing truth now. The silence is not just hungry. It is patient. It has waited 150 years. It can wait a little longer. But a story, once told, is a difficult thing to kill. It is a virus of meaning in a world of void. It is my hope that this story is a noisy, chaotic, inconvenient virus. That it will be repeated, and heard, and believed. So listen. Please, listen. Can you hear it? The silence between these words? It's listening back.